And now it no longer requires alcohol. It no longer requires darkness. Yeah. People are not doing it in broad daylight. Yeah. And then in open family events, it has moved stages. It's no longer something where people are just talking. It's now something that people are doing in daylight. People are doing sober, most of them, sober. And then in large group stadiums. It's not now some club.
It seemingly nowadays is the culmination of every event that is the sign of tune.
That is the sign of. It has actually gathered a habitual nature. It has become a habit. Victor Ndula did an amazing cartoon on the papers, and it was a big chair. And then Raila is sitting on the corner of it, and he's like, I'm not in government. And then you see Ruto over there like, what do you mean you're on the chair?
But we are sharing this bed together. We are in marriage. Yes, holy matrimony.
Holy matrimony. And the reason why, even his trip to South Sudan. Wait. That's not a small, that's a government level kind of initiative.
It's a huge statement.
That's a huge statement. Hey, if Dwale is in health, everybody, we are going to die. Just make sure.
Really?
Yeah. Someone put up, just take care of your health, because if something happens to you soon, count it out. I was like, oh my gosh,
it's working
for somebody, and I can say it is direct. Yeah. Then my brother looks at me and says, oh, they had to bribe. I was deflated.
What?
I was deflated. So even that is showing you where his focus is, where the agenda is. It's on 2027.
Great to have you on Richard Mwenja Exclusive. We're coming to the end of the month of March, the year of our Lord 2025. We are so honored to have your company with us on Richard Mwenja Exclusive. I'm Richard Mwenja, and today we continue unpacking conversations that are shaping Kenya's political and governance landscape. And as usual, I'm not alone in studio. Every Saturday, I'm with the phenomenal company of Executive Director of Siasa Place, an NGO out here doing youth empowerment, spearheading democracy issues in this country. Madam Nerima Wako. Nerima, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Looking like a typical Gen Z in every flair of it, huh?
It's feeling like the weekend. So, yeah.
How have you been, though?
It's been a hectic week.
Really?
Yeah, it was hectic.
But your face can't tell it all. You are all smiley out here.
I'm smiley, but today that's why I'm very relaxed and casual, because I'm like, we made it. We made it to the end of the week.
Yeah. You're in the lion's den throughout the week.
Crisis. The number of firefighting I did this week, I was even like, wow, why am I in this line of work? So, yeah, it's one of those.
You are not the only person who seemingly was in the lion's den. Peter Salasia, Mumias East Member of Parliament, and was attacked by people while watching a football match between Gabon and Kenya, Harambee Stars. And there are many who believe that was targeted attack on dissenting voices in Kenya today, critics of today's government. But also some believe, like Peter Kaluma, Member of Parliament, that those were not goons from ODM. Those were goons. Gen Zs who are out there to attack Salasia. Are we speaking to an issue of political intolerance in the first place?
It is an issue of political intolerance, because obviously he was targeted because of how open he has been in terms of being angry and upset against Raila.
Sure.
That's obvious. And even when you look at the situations, when have we seen scenarios like that happening? We saw it at Bomas, the time Kebaso was also attacked. We've also seen it happen to Kalonzo. There was a time he was giving a press statement. Sure. And then even if you go back in the day, we still call them Men in Black, that moment in Kasarani. So these are politically hired goons. There's nothing Gen Z about them. If anything, Gen Zs are expressive. They do not really condone violence. We have seen them come together organically. The ones who are Gen Zs are the ones who are chanting Ruto must go. The people who throw stones and chairs and dustbins.
Yeah.
My God, it hit his face. It even broke.
Yeah.
That sort of violence, those are goons that are hired to make sure that you teach him a lesson.
Would you then say that was one of the most unfortunate statements to come from Peter Kaluma, that those were Gen Zs, not ODM goons?
Absolutely, because you see, But we're used to this sort of thing. Even during the protests, when they were coming out, and then the protests turned violent. When we saw people going into businesses and looting, now it became, look at the Gen Zs. They're now stealing from our businesses. Those were hired. We even had images of people receiving money from Range Rovers, you know, parked outside, and someone had said this belongs to a particular politician. The proof is all there. The evidence is all there. It has nothing to do with Gen Zs. These are people who are incited. So anytime that we see a situation become chaotic, they will blame the Gen Z. But at the end of the day, time will give us the truth, where we will know these are politically hired individuals.
The argument in town is that Baba must be respected to whatever level possible. And Peter Salasya was openly disrespecting Raila Odinga. Do you think it's a matter of respect that you're talking about, or is just Salasya calling out the mess for what it is?
Salasya, I mean, he has a different way of communicating. Even some of the things that he does online are not things I would do or support, but that is him. An adult above 18, he can do whatever he wants to do. But I think what we're seeing is the dynamics of politics changing. And, you know, I normally say you're dealing with a population where on every social media platform, the first question they'll ask you, it's either, what are you thinking? What's on your mind? How do you feel? It asks for your opinion. And culturally, we have been indoctrinated to respect our elders. So even if you're in a room, even ushago, even funerals, any serious meeting, there's a level of who speaks, you know? You over there, you as the youth, you know, even you can't even come and interject unless the community itself has endorsed you to become an elder, which is normally done through like a council of elders. Unless you receive that respect, it's very rare for you to sit at the same table with elders or people who reach a certain age. And it's because of that notion of culture. So I feel that we're in an interesting dynamic where political language is changing, you know. Gen Zs, young people, millennials, they're changing the political language. They're changing how they engage in politics. And I say this because of the humor we see around. Even on our platforms, you'll see people putting jokes, you know, speeches of Ruto. They will be dancing to it, memes. And that is something that 20 years ago we would never do. Of a president, there's this sense of mystery. There's authority. There's power. And now you're seeing people recording videos right next to his motorcade, yelling at him, chanting that they don't want anything to do with him. You saw the video when he was in Mombasa. People were continuing with their biashara. They were even acting kama yeye ni mtu wa kawaida. That is something that...
Tell it to the birds.
Yeah, that's something that we would never see 20 years ago when it came to presidency. So for me, in that regard, I think that Salasya is just bringing out a new age of political engagement where we're seeing the criticism, even though he has been alone a lot of times. And he's saying, I'm going to be the lone wolf. I'm going to be the lone ranger. My stand is my stand. And he's completely changing what we've been used to seeing, especially around Raila. It's this expectation that Western is a bloc that belongs to him, and it's obvious. And I think that's a shift that's quite fascinating to be able to see. So he's going to fight hard.
Nerima, much as it's right to pay allegiance to a particular leader in the political landscape, would you say that the mistake for ODM has been not only paying allegiance to Raila Odinga, but they have overdone that by now idolizing him? Perhaps why we've seen attacks to people like Salasya anytime they're at odds with Raila Odinga.
But idolizing is not new. And, you know, even when you think about our politics, not even just Kenya, globally, there's a sense of populism that's growing. Let's talk about Trump. He created this relative status quo where he banked on, you know, Americans for America. If it's not helping the Americans, then I don't want to be part of it. So he created this, honestly, it's a falsehood of a nationhood. And him rising to the top that way is because he was able to identify with people who felt invisible, people who felt that their needs are not being met by the current administration. So let's bring it to to Kenya. A lot of our political leaders, they have built themselves, mainly men, around kingpinship. And, you know, even when you hear how people elect, they'll be like, because he is one of our own. So they touch on people's feelings that this is a community member, this is our tribesman, and this is why we should support them. So this sense of he is seen or perceived as an idol, he is. Because even when you go to rallies, Raila is very good with stories. He would name the campaign. There was always a story related to it. Name it. And it's always a story that has biblical context, you know? Where were we supposed to be going? See, we were supposed to be going to
Canaan, yeah, sure. Promised land.
Tulikuwa njiani.
Yeah. Until crocodiles happened.
Crocodiles, you know? And even Kalonzo has his own stories, you know? And even when you hear the way people talk about political mobilizing and how apparently when Mwai Kibaki passed on and how he had to go by road and there was like leadership would never come from this side of the river.
Yeah, sure.
So a lot of our politics is linked to spiritual, maybe biblical, traditional storytelling. And for people to have a sense of, let's follow this leader, there has to be a sense of building them as an idol. And this has happened from way before, when even when you look at other countries and how they did, or how they dealt with colonizers, so that they were not afraid of bullets. There would be fake potions to tell people, ukikunywa hii,
Kinjeketile ngwale.
it cannot kill you. So that's how you mobilize, and that's how we've been mobilizing. It hasn't changed drastically. So that's why there's this allegiance and this connectedness. But do I think the younger generation connects that much? No. I feel older generations have this sense of being attached because of the trauma. It's a trauma bond where when you're under dictatorship for that long, and here we have the Odingas, like a family that give you a semblance of hope, of opposition, of people's rights. This younger generation has no connection to that. It's been stories. It's been things they've seen in history books. It's things that their parents say to them. And so there is that disconnect. So do they identify with these old school stories? Not so much. Are we going to create new stories? Absolutely. Are we on the way to creating them? Yes. We are on the way to creating them. And some of them will be complete jokes, but that's what young people identify with now. It's that comedy, that drama,
memes,
and that's why you see Salasia all over the place. You're like, this guy, I don't understand this guy, but you'd be surprised the kind of following he has on those very platforms.
So by going against Raila Odinga, it doesn't mean that Salasia's political obituary is written. He still has more political oxygen to live on.
No, he has. He has. And I say this also because I think they're in an interesting position. When I say Salasia, it's also Babu Owino, Sifuna, Amisi. It's all these men who are below the age of 40 or 45. They have to find their footing. They have to start thinking around what does political organizing look like without having Raila in the picture. If they were wise, they would start thinking about that now. Because even if we are to look at timelines that we have, God gives us 70 years, that's a blessing. Beyond that,
living at his mercy.
You're living at his mercy, and it's a potential risk. So even for you, for your own sustainability politically, you have to think, what's the plan B? What does it look like? How do I navigate? Rather than waiting for situations to occur and for you to figure out where's my place within this political party or within this political alignment.
Talking about the Gen Z and many people in Kenya having a contrary view and being bold about it, the KDF and the NIS have sounded warning, that one regarding the Ruto must go chance, asking Kenyans to exercise Ruto must go on the ballot box come August 2027. But for now, they should go slow on that one. And would you say, Nerima, that the NIS and KDF have a reason to indeed call Kenyans to order and say, enough with this, the right time will come for you to chant Ruto must go, but only on the ballot box?
I think they're now realizing what all Kenyans knew. You know, initially they were saying this is being instigated, it's someone behind these Gen Zs, And for them, even in that statement, was for them to realize, oh, people are angry. Like, it's organic.
It's no longer about Ford Foundation now.
It's not Ford Foundation. This thing is organic.
Not
Everyone has been
commercial activism.
Yeah, it's not commercial.
Demonizing Nerima Wako and Boniface Mwangi.
This thing is organic. And even when those protests were happening, and there was a time when there was a press statement that the president did, and he was like, whoever is instigating. I remember watching and saying, it's you.
You are the author of this.
Yeah. Every time you appear, it's you. Imagine you're the instigator. And so I think that it has finally reached them that it is indeed true. Everywhere he pops up, he is indeed the instigator of this energy. And, and I think it's for them, by the time they are saying that publicly, it's them now recognizing that, hey, actually things can get out of hand. And for me, that recognition also shows that, initially they would be able to call Raila to calm down the masses. And now they're like, okay, at this point now, since it was happening and they were both next to each other, what's going to calm the masses down? And I feel it's an equation that worries them. And it worries them because social media has made things so open. If not open, it has demanded for openness. And so when you have a population that now has become extremely vigilant after the protests, it becomes a lot harder to, one, convince, because they come and interrogate everything you say. And then number two, to mobilize, because now you have these different silos and pockets of mobilization. When you have influencers, people who just rose to fame on social media, now rolling in even a network. And these are players that they didn't see coming. These are people that rose to the top, whether it's through unions, whether it's through activism in student leadership, whether it's through the church. They grew into this position. And now they are dealing with people who just popped up. And they're just like, what? Who?
Caught them off guard.
It's like, it caught them off guard. And then it happened so quickly. They're like, okay, who is the network? What is the group? But it's a mixture of groups, because the internet makes things flat. So now you have someone who can influence in various sectors, from medicine to business, without even going physically to a venue. It completely changes how they're able to counter that sort of mobilizing. And I think for me, that statement was almost sounding an alarm that, okay, what we're seeing, there's something here. But we don't want to alert you, to scare you, but we are definitely recognizing there's something here. And if you see us, moving in a way, just know it's for your own good. We were sounding that things are looking like they are not okay. And so if we move in this direction, we already told you things are not okay. So it's also to give us a heads up that we're probably going to see stricter movement, especially around people who are probably caught chanting. We're going to see a lot more people getting in trouble because they were like, we told you that we're not so sure about the situation. And there's something that Haji said, actually, in his presentation in that meeting yesterday. He talked about security is very interesting, We are an entity that needs to be trusted, because at the end of the day, we do it for the good of the country. And he talked about, let's think about it like a blanket. You know that the blanket keeps you warm.
True.
But are you the one who is going to be like, how are these stitches connecting together to keep me warm?
True.
And he said, if we take too much time looking at the stitches, we might unravel the entire blanket. And then in the end, we have nothing to keep us warm. And he was like, I would like Kenyans to think of your security that way, where you cannot know everything, but assume that things are done for your own good. And I found it fascinating that we have reached a level as a country where national intelligence is trying to open up, but not really, which is a very different way of...
A new president.
It's new. It's new. We're just used to like special branch. Like we know they are there. We hear of them.
Held in mystery for long.
Very mysterious. We don't know the faces behind it.
Yeah.
We're not sure. Sometimes we hear that they have been disbanded. There's a new one. You don't really know what happened to the old one. You know. And then here you have this center where they're like, we want to be a little bit more open and for you to understand the internal and external security situations of the country. So I think this is a new precedence for them.
A new precedence for them.
Yeah.
Indeed, Nerima. Moving on swiftly, let's talk about the mini reshuffle within the executive and more particularly within the ranks of cabinet secretaries in this country. This week, we saw a mini reshuffle out of which a CS was sacked, that is Public Service CS Justine Muturi. In his place, Mbeere North Member of Parliament Geoffrey Ruko has been nominated for that particular docket. We've seen other people being reshuffled, say Aden Duale being now nominated for the health docket, Deborah Mlongo transferred to the environment docket. But let's begin from Justine Muturi's standpoint. The president sees him as an incompetent person. At one point, he acknowledges that he was a fairly incompetent AG. But it is still the president who transferred him to the Public Service CS. Does that in the first place point to the direction of, yes, you have an incompetent employee, but also the employer is incompetent in the first place?
In fact, I saw Rosina Kombe put up a tweet and she said, you know, in economics, in business, oftentimes you're told if the leader of a company is constantly doing shuffles, then the problem is with the incompetent leader, not the shuffles being made. No, it has nothing to do with the employees. And even just what you've mentioned, in terms of the very fact that they were given these positions, it means that they hopefully have received those positions because of their competency, their history in terms of service. But the fact that we see reshuffles every other month, it's also very difficult for people to actually produce anything. Government is so large and so slow. By the time these people come in, they come in with their people as well. They hire new people to come in as well. They don't come in solo. They can even have a team of 30 people surrounding them, just from admin to security to protocol. It comes with a team. And so even by the time this team gets into the zone of we're in this position, people have been removed. That's just how fast. So there's no one who's going to perform. If you look at people lasting for 2 months, 1 month, unless they're working 24 hours a day. And for me, I think the major concern is Duale in health. I'm just like, Lord.
Talking of which, the health docket has had 3 CSs within the last 2.5 years and over 2 PSs. And are we not really gambling too much with the health docket in the first place? Looking at the reshuffles within that docket.
Too much. Unless he was moved to health, because they know they have a PS who understands what he's doing, and they let the PS do his job, and Duale is just sitting there looking pretty and trying to figure out what to do in terms of mobilizing for 2027, unless they give him that position to relax and breathe and just let Oluga do his job. That's the only thing I can see. But as far as him adding value to the health sector, absolutely not. In fact, we were worried about him being in environment. In fact, maybe now that I see he's been moved to health, we're like, maybe he should have stayed in environment. Yes, because I even saw someone post up here, if Duale is in health, everybody, we are going to die. Just make sure.
Really?
Yeah, someone put up, just take care of your health, because if something happens to you soon, count it out.
Skeptics' argument would then say that maybe Aden Duale is just a jack of many trades and a master of them all. Perhaps why he started from Defense Ministry, Environment CS, now Health Docket. Would you buy that?
I would not buy that. How many Kenyans are we? We are so many Kenyans. Brilliant Kenyans. And I often say, anywhere in this world you travel, you will find a Kenyan. Someone doing amazing things in whatever country. They're even hired by other governments, given citizenship because of their brilliance. So we have no shortage of people who can serve. But this administration has shown us that finding people is so difficult that they even have to recycle sitting members. And we're talking about, the last time I checked, there were 14 14 empty seats because there've been no by-elections. People have died, people have been appointed, leaving things vacant, 14. And that's the last time I checked. And I'm sure if we check most recently, every appointment, every announcement, there's someone being pulled out.
Now Mbere North is going to be part of that list.
So we're just like, we can't even have elections because no IEBC. So here he is, you know, trying to make this part of government work while killing this other part because now the people don't have representation. And even as recently as actually today, there's a funeral service. One of my brother's really good friends, yes, thank you, has passed on from kidney failure, dialysis. And it's been years of trying to get a transplant. And we're actually surprised that SHA actually paid a majority of the ICU bill, the hospital bill. It paid a good amount. And so I was so ecstatic. I was like, oh my gosh, SHA has worked.
It's working.
For somebody, and I can say it is direct.
Yeah.
Then my brother looks at me and says, oh, they had to bribe. I was deflated.
What?
I was deflated. It's like, no. They had to bribe, and then it was paid. I was like, can I just get a good story that's just clean?
Without blemish at some point?
I know. From, you know, application to process to it actually helping families in need. To
the final discharge.
Final. I was like, can we just have those stories? So when he said that, I was deflated. I was like, I actually thought that I knew one case, you know?
And you're ready to run with it.
I was ready. It's like, yeah, they had to bribe some officer to, and then it worked.
Sad.
So, you know, it needs to have someone in that docket who genuinely has, you know, a passion and servitude to just make sure this works. And if we don't have that sort of attitude from the beginning, from the top, it's not going to work anywhere.
It's about the passion from the top.
It has to be from
that
the
yes,
top.
you have a leader, a CS who is passionate about that thing, but also the president himself grants you the goodwill and the free hand to apply yourself.
Yes.
That's it?
Yes, that's it. Because if we have people who are just placeholders, just expect to receive the same service and expect to see the same results of mismanagement of resource, for sure. Yes.
And when it comes to now handpicking some men or women out here and placing themselves in particular dockets within our ministries, would you say that oftentimes it has just been about political patronage? Because we are talking about why fire CS Justin Muturi and bring a serving member of parliament, elected member of parliament, to replace him? Are you after the political gain of it or after meritocracy in the first place? Do you take concern with such?
I do take concern with such, and it's definitely for political gain. And as we know, those positions, most of the time, they are not supposed to be political positions, just because of some of the technical expertise that's required. And people will argue that it's the PS position that needs to be a bit more technical than the CS. But also the fact that we're seeing how, you know, the president is really thinking about all of this. You know, remember, this is also happening in a week of meeting regions, from Western to Eastern, right before traveling to Mlima next week. So even that is showing you where his focus is, where the agenda is. It's on 2027. It's no longer about service. It's no longer about showing that his last, you know, term or his recent term is something that we should trust for him to continue. He has already thrown that aside. He knows, I'm not going to convince the Kenyan people. I need people to now advertise for me. I need communities to now advertise for me. And that's why he's selecting individuals that have community backing, so that when this individual goes and speaks on his behalf, because he recognizes him speaking himself, it goes through one ear and out the other. And that's the political alignment that he's currently working on and hoping to change public opinion. But, you know, we also have to remember, these people are not really welcome home. Even them, they are struggling with their own
The grounds are hostile already?
They are hostile. Very few of them are able to go comfortably. And I'm talking about comfortably without having to cough up 1,000 shillings, a bag of rice,
to mobilize
a bag
crowds.
of sugar, mafuta,
Leso za kina mama.
maleso, I'm talking about unaweza ingia kwa grau na unaenda kwa base. Like you just walk in and spend time with your community.
Bila kutoboka kitu.
Hey, that is very hard for these guys right now. Very, 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 very difficult for them. So even for them, their ground has changed. And even right now, going to churches, people are still uneasy. They are not sure. They'll go to a church, they'll hope to speak. Sometimes they'll be allowed to speak. Sometimes they're told to cut it short. So that culture is also not back to normal. You know, people are speaking at funerals and they are being talked back to. You know, don't usiseme hizo vitu hapa. It's still a bit tense for them as well. So here he is sending out scouts, and the scouts are like, hey, the terrain hata sisi, tutajaribu tu, you know?
You're talking about this, the terrain growing hostile by the day for some of the elected leaders, and you say that is what has attributed to seeing a senator leaving that position, going to serve as state officer or even a member of parliament because they are sure I'm not gonna get a second term come the next election cycle.
Some of them, I think it's about a promotion because they're thinking about, I mean, here you are, you've been offered an opportunity to serve at the executive level. And so they're saying, this is a step up, you know? And for many of them, they're like, okay, if I look at my trajectory, and you're right, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to come back. I'm not so sure if I can. But also, how many people have actually rejected such positions? It's extremely rare. To see people reject such positions, and also because of the perks that they come with. And remember, it also reduces the amount of weight in terms of you dealing with your constituents directly. And you know, we said on this show some time back that a lot of these people are social welfare officers.
Yeah, sure.
So if you could get a break from dealing with hundreds of calls a day, distributing resource, why not? And then it's for, if you're lucky, 2 years left. But now if it's for 2 months, 3 months, I do not know, you know, you have thrown your career out the window. And there's also another similar career like that, IEBC. I normally wonder, people who apply for IEBC commissioner. Yeah, that's also another career where when you apply, you're like, okay, once I leave, what's the next for me? It has actually destroyed people's careers. And there's no IEBC that has done 2 elections, you know? After 1 election, a lot of the commissioners
are out.
And so even that's also another job where I'm like, hey, this one is dicey.
We're going to come to the IEBC issue in a few, but let's talk about Raila Odinga, ODM leader and Azimio leader. And earlier this week, he dismissed claims that he's in government, he's in President Ruto's government. But many would argue that you are in government, stop living in denial. I want to understand this. From the optics of Nerima Wako, is Raila Odinga playing denial games here? That he's not in government, that he only loaned out experts and is just patronizing them so that they're in the right direction?
Victor Ndula did an amazing cartoon on the papers, and it was a big chair. And then Raila is sitting on the corner of it and he's like, I'm not in government. And then you see Ruto over there like, what do you mean you're on the chair? But
we are sharing this bed together. We are in marriage. Yes, holy matrimony. Holy
matrimony. And the reason why, even his trip to South Sudan, wait, that's not a small, that's a government level kind of initiative.
It's a huge statement.
That's a huge statement. By the time you're like, hey, our neighbors are in crisis, I trust you enough to go and deal with the situation, knowing that we have CSAs.
Not just CSS, experts.
Even some of them in positions that, you know, they have done this for years and decades. And he didn't say you with the team of foreign affairs and, you know, he said you.
Long-serving diplomats.
He said you, I trust, you know. So you can definitely see the amount of responsibility that's being given to him. It is quite obvious. And I think he's saying that so that he continues to get like some public support. Yes, because people told him when he did his tour, they said, we don't want you to join with this guy. But he still went ahead and joined with him. And I think he assumed that it would be a lot easier to gain public buy-in. And he's saying, hey, it's not so easy. So, you know, you can repeat and say things over and over, because us here, we're in the city, we're in urban places, we read papers, we follow political context. But there are people in rural Kenya where they will just hear snippets of information, snippets of the news. So the bite will be, when they're in the market on the radio, I am not part of government. So he's trying to keep that population hopeful. That, he's still with us. He still has us, you know, as an interest. He still has us in mind. He's still doing this for us. So I think he's still trying to keep that population assured that they have not lost it all. They still hope. I'm still going to fight for you as the people, even though I may appear close. This is all for the betterment of the country. This is all for national unity.
Another round of liberation.
Yes, because we cannot have an economy when there's no peace. Peace, you know, the message is with peace we can build business.
But Nerima Wako, do you think the writing on the wall is that Raila Odinga and President Ruto are experiencing winning grip even in their political bastions? If you remember, barely 3 weeks ago, Raila Odinga was heckled at Gusii Stadium. Barely a week ago, President Ruto at Nyayo Stadium during the Harambee Stars versus Gabon match, people heckled him, calling out Ruto must go chance. Would you say that they are actually living in denial?
Yeah, because even, you know, by the time people are chanting at football games, me, I'm not a football person at all.
And it shows.
What do you mean it shows?
You rarely talk about football in the first place.
I do not know Premier League, World Cup, what. I just know that there are teams and there are moments. Kenyans are just focused on teams and stuff. But by the time politics seeps into these entertainment sports, just know things have changed. Because a lot of times people will say, I just want to enjoy the game. You know, people will go and watch a game at a bar after work. They just want to relax. They don't want anything to do with politics. So even when the protests started, you remember people were singing at midnight, you know, chanting. By the time it was in clubs, you knew it has moved into a social space. And now it no longer requires alcohol. It no longer requires darkness. People are not doing it in broad daylight. And then in open family events, it has moved stages. It's no longer something where people are just talking. It's now something that people are doing in daylight. People are doing sober, most of them, sober. And then in large group stadiums. It's not now some club.
It seemingly nowadays is the culmination of every event that is the sign of tune.
That is the sign of. It has actually gathered a habitual nature. It has become a habit where, hey, we can't be this many people now to say me, you
must
know,
go.
we can't say, we have to say must go. Tuko watu wengi, we must say must go. It has actually gathered ground of becoming a culture. And I think for them, the assumption was, if we take care of this, if we take care of that, we've taken care of this.
We've silenced the messenger.
Yes. But now they are realizing, oh no, we're not silencing. They're becoming louder. And it's like their tactics, they are not working anymore. And so that's when now you're seeing, they're like, how do we infiltrate this group? How do we identify with this group? And they're going to struggle, especially if they continue to do politics as usual, because we have crossed over. Business is unusual right now.
Let's cross over and talk about IEBC. Of course, this is a body that is going to be mandated to execute the next general elections and even other duties within their mandate before the election in 2027. And we are experiencing a push to reconstitute the IEBC in the first place. This week we've seen interviews seeking out the chairperson and many other commissioners therein. But there are those who take concern even with those in that panel that is looking out for people to constitute that IEBC. Case in point, nominated Meru Deputy Governor Madam Kiome, and many believe that that's even unconstitutional in the first place to have her sit at such a level, at such a panel. Would you say that even the process of reconstituting the IEBC already has stained blemishes that need to be addressed?
Absolutely. I remember when the first list came out, a lot of people were wondering, can people who are already serving And that was also one of the questions. As public officials or state officials really be able to apply for such a position such as this? And also, on that list, I think it was only one person who was a PWD. And remember, there was another list that was gazetted on the 21st. And this one, they had included like 6 more people. And in this list, they actually added a young person. So like one person below 35. And there was a lot of wrangling as well. You know, there are youth organizations, youth groups that, you know, wrote a letter to the selection panel. The National Youth Council wrote a letter to the selection panel. And there are some young people who actually protested outside the selection panel office. And so it also shows you that in that list, a lot of young people were saying, how can we have a majority young population? And even your short list didn't even have one, you know? And they applied. And you could see them say, how are we? I believe it's Fred Ogola. I don't know if he's officially petitioned in terms of someone like Nyachae and his age, in terms of, you know, the age limit in serving some of these positions. And saying, how can we be looking for people who we're not quite sure they should have retired by now? And then the majority population, we don't even have on the list. And I think this is important because it's showing you that Kenyans actually want an IEBC to trust. But when we look at the short list itself, we could already see some political affiliation or influence for you to get on that list. I mean, out of a list of 1,100 and something, how is it we can recognize almost half of those names?
You saw cronies in that list?
Yes. Yes.
So the trust question is very evident.
It's very evident. And unfortunately, they are not starting on the right foot. If anything, we should have maybe seen 2, 3 familiar names and been like, okay, this is someone that I've seen very active in the sector. There's even someone that I personally know who applied for IBC last time. He always makes it to the short list. Always.
But it ends at that.
It ends at that. Like, I'm wishing him the best with this next one, Kimoso. But he was also appointed to a commission. Yeah, he was. And so these are people who are already within the system. So even when you're talking about, do we really want an IBC that the public trusts? It would be, let's try and get people who have served elsewhere out there, have a track record we can verify, and bring fresh air so that it doesn't feel like it's the same old ploy, it's the same old game, and we already understand who has already gotten the position before even the race begins. And I think for a lot of Kenyans, they are very, very keen to see who are some of these people who made to the shortlist. They are listening to the interviews keenly. And I know that there are people who have managed to get into IBC because they did the interview very well. They were not supposed to make it to IBC. And so even these interviews being public helps. But you have to be able to give us a short list that is worth watching, rather than having these recycled individuals, and then we are already removed from the process even before the process begins. The state the country is in, the government should be so keen in having an IBC that people trust. Because when you're telling people to wait till 2027, and they see the formation of a commission that cannot carry a credible, fair 2027, they will completely block 2027 as soon as you launch this commission.
They will?
They will. If they see a commission that is weak, people will forget 2027. They'll be like, why? That commission can't do anything. If anything, this administration should be so keen in having an IBC that can carry trust. That could mellow down temperatures until 2027.
You're passing the impression that this administration is underestimating public intelligence even when it comes to reconstituting the IEBC. Would you say that Kenyans are woke enough to discern on individuals who are on that list, and the government need to smell the coffee about that?
Yes, yes, they need to smell the coffee. Otherwise, it will be another 10 months, and then they'll be like, oh, the way they were talking about Gen Z being organic.
Yeah.
They just need to observe. These Kenyans are vigilant, and that vigilance is not going anywhere. And how do we work with this vigilance? That's what they need to be doing. It's not how do we fool the Kenyan public.
Yeah.
It needs to be, we understand they are vigilant. How do we work around this vigilance? They are not doing that.
Talking about the Gen Zs, barely a few days ago, CJ Emeritus David Maraga has accepted the endorsement from Gen Z to run for the presidency. And Erima Wako, most will want to understand whether Maraga comes with the bread and butter needed for this country, and whether in the first place he should take this endorsement seriously. What's your take on that?
So there are two things. There are two things that's going to matter in 2027. And I believe those two things, it's going to be someone who fights corruption, and it's going to be someone who brings change.
And is a signpost of that from your lenses, David Maraga?
I feel that when he was in the Supreme Court, when he was Chief Justice, there was something different about him. Definitely. I believe that there are things that he did on his own. There are things that even when he came out and did public addresses, oftentimes alone, there's the scene we remember of 2/3.
Yeah.
He did that, or even though he didn't have the other judges around him, or even the time he talked about being broke and the amount of resources that was being limited, or when we talk about him not being exorbitant in terms of the amount of resource he would use, and just being a very simple person. So I think that Kenyans are yearning for something fresh, something different. Because a lot of times when I talk to people and they say, but we can't waste, I don't want to waste my vote. Let me tell you, all these elections that you didn't waste your vote, that you think you saved it saved you from, where are we now? Because you didn't waste it. See, we're here.
Sure.
So we have to now change the language around people coming to the fore. It has to be Kenyans. This time, all this time, you've been saving that vote because you don't want to waste it. I need you to waste your vote this time, because if saving the vote can lead us to here, what will wasting do? Surely. Can it be worse than this? And that's the kind of language that we must change. Kenyans can't be talking about change and voting in the same pattern. If you're serious about change, then change how you're voting.
Walk the talk.
Walk the talk.
With your vote on.
Yes, courageously. And I think that's what Gen Zs are saying. I think that's what they're doing. They're like, see, we said we want someone different. We're walking the talk. Si tulisema hatutaki ufisadi, we're walking the talk.
And we have our weapon of choice, our voter, our voter's card.
And there are going to be more. And there are going to be more. I can't wait to begin to see young people coming to the front. Beyond Kebaso, there are going to be young people coming to the front. I believe that. We are going to see an alternative coalition.
An alternative coalition?
Yes. Believe you me.
It could
There,
be.
yes. There are so many parties as we speak trying to register. If they are just stuck on ORPP, but they want to. And now they are seeing, if we can't register, let's just combine with the dormant parties and rebrand. There are people who don't want to be part of the same old. They just want change. They're just like, I can't continue my life in this same circle that we're in.
I know that they want to register these parties for commercial transactions. It's about bringing change.
They want to. They want to. Genuinely, there are a lot of people who want to. Not everybody is perfect, but I think that where we have gotten, you know, I used to say, I don't think being in government is that hard.
Yeah.
You know, I used to think you have research teams, you have technical,
robust team.
robust.
Yeah.
We unakuja kwa ofisi,
Kukaa tu.
unasoma ma report.
Yeah.
There's a junior officer who has done the thinking for you. You're just like, I used to think that.
Just the signatory.
Yeah, you just sign, you know, as long as you have a good team. This government has shown me government is not that simple to run.
Twice as hard.
It has shown me kumbe, things can just go left because you have the wrong people.
So not that it will excite Nerima Wako should she be nominated for health CS docket today or even defense.
CS I can't manage. Even I'll tell you straight up. But public service, governance, the way things work, I can. Youth, I can. Those are things I know and I love to do. But I will tell you straight up this, I will not promise you I can perform. Because me, I know the kind of population we are dealing with, people don't have time. And I've said this a lot.
Wajui subiri yavuta heri?
Hakuna, like guys are really struggling out here. Watu wana hustle, wanachafuta kazi, and we cannot just be gallivanting in nice hotels with nice things and hanging. We don't have the luxury of rest where this country is. And if we do not take care of this young, vibrant population, we are doomed. This population, their energies need to be channeled. We need to build a nation, and we cannot do that with broken systems.
You're talking about this young, vibrant segment that is going to define the future of Kenya. And this particular segment has one factor that's going to play a major role in defining their future. That is the access to education. And barely 3 days ago, we saw the Court of Appeal squash the suspension that had been there regarding the new university funding model. And now the model has been given the green light to be spearheaded to other phases. And would you say that that is already a huge red flag when it comes to stumbling blocks in the future of these young Kenyans who want to access an education and at a very affordable rate in the first place?
It's a huge red flag. I'm disappointed. In fact, the team that took the matter to court, Maxwell, Magawi, KHRC, and some other entities, been trying to engage them even yesterday. And we're disappointed because even the Auditor General report showed just how much money has been mismanaged and wasted. We're talking about 9.9 billion. 9.9 billion, and we don't know where it went. And it even mentions specific institutions, and some of them spending up to 22 million on people who graduated years ago. You know, they were receiving money and they graduated. And so you're talking about ghost students, when you're talking about even people who weren't even placed anywhere receiving monies. And we are not concerned about there's a problem with it. We've already said it's expensive. And then when it's supposed to support students and it's seeping through holes somewhere, it's not going to people who are actually going to school. Huge red flag. And it's those challenges that when they are not being fixed and nipped in the bud, that's how you have a very frustrated young population that at the end of the day, they'll see education is not working for me. I can't find opportunities. There is no work. What am I left to do? And so when you see this rise, and this is a real concern for me, I think even it was this week, there was a gang in Kwale walking around with machetes. When you begin to see stories like that of gangs now just rummaging through communities, you know, there's no sense of order. It's actually anarchy. Crime rising like that. This should not become an occurring story of every day for us. It was scary enough when gangs were surrounding the president in his Nairobi tour. That for me is the red flag of education is not working for these young people who should be in school if they had access to it, since they come from, you know, underprivileged economic backgrounds. And it's showing you that the economy is not working for them. So they are left with crime and violence. And we're seeing it in front of us. And it's not a political season yet. The fact that we're seeing it this early is
You're talking about the state of our economy. And let's traverse and go to the other side of Western Kenya, where you have a home. And Honorable Sabina Chege has taken concern with the state of housing in that particular part of Kenya. The many, many mad houses, arguing that her coming from Mount Kenya, she has witnessed her forefathers working hard enough to even improve the state of housing in Mount Kenya region and many other dimensions of the economy of that particular region. Would you support this concern from Honorable Sabina Chege, and is she justified to do that correlation between Mount Kenya and Western Kenya when it comes to housing and other issues?
I was so disappointed in her saying working hard. And it really hurts me. You know, there are places I've traveled to, Central, and I'm really surprised at the road network. And it hurts me. That they have roads in interior places.
Tarmacked roads for that case.
Tarmacked.
Yeah.
As some roads were coming the other day, and there are roads in my villages that have never been tarmacked. In fact, if it rains, just count yourself. Kama uko nyumbani, uko sawa. Because that sand, that soil, you know that soil.
An extreme sport.
Inagunya. hata huwezi vaa viatu.
Yeah.
And we're living
60 years later after independence.
60. Hata kuona stima. Watu wanatumia solar if you're lucky.
Despite last mile connectivity agenda.
Stima hakuna. You're the one, you're rich if you can pull that kawaya for a pole. And for me, what she saw is poverty and just how the circulation of resource is not even in our country. What she saw is why devolution is important and why devolution must work. It has nothing to do with how people are hardworking.
Yeah.
In fact, that thing really pissed me off. It has nothing to do with that. And I mean, mud houses, they keep the house cool. We have survived with the cow dung.
Yeah.
We have. But it makes me so angry at the level of ignorance at someone who is a leader of this country and they don't understand the dynamics of our country. Yeah? And that's a majority reality for many, 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 many of us. And it also shows you that distance to the capital and how it also automatically cuts you from the flow of resource. When our homes are 8 hours away by road, the expense. For me, there's nothing that hurts me more than people not being able to go home during a fair.
Yeah, Christmas, Easter.
Aye, that thing. It hurts me. And then you're seeing people hiking and Uwezi enda home, like that disconnect. There are people who live in Kibra, they have not been for home for years because of that transporting kwenda Siaya.
Yeah.
Hawezi, they can't come up with that money.
It is that bad.
It's that bad.
Yet we have elected leaders.
We do. So for me, I think it was a complete ignorant thing to say. The conversation should have been, how can we have access, in terms of resources to communities such as this? This is just an example of many others that are worse. I have been to schools in Kakamega that were built in 1925, still made of mud. And these public schools, at the state they're in, most of them are mud. They are not concrete in no way. But when you ask how much resource has been allocated to the school, the MP has come and donated with pictures and checks. But it never got to that school. It never got to that school.
Just for media optics.
Optics. And so it goes back to the two things that I said. Corruption and change. We have to minimize the corruption that occurs for resources to flow to the grassroots, and we have to change the kind of leaders that we have. If they do not have the interests of the people that they represent, they need to go.
Sure enough, Nerima. We have a minute to wrap up our program. Let me have your closing thoughts on your call to action to Kenyans this week. Be it whatever concern you're taking issue with, whatever field it is in our economy or even in our governance structures. What is it today?
Anyone but them. If we see the same people coming to the ballot, if you vote for those same people and expect a different result, you are a fool. Anyone but them. Even if the kind of person you want on the ballot is not there, write your name. Write your own name. Rebel the vote. Because we cannot continue the same trajectory.
Otherwise, you are a fool. If you go for the same people.
You are a fool. You are a fool.
You don't have a better word, a more polite word for them?
You don't want to be helped. You can't be screaming here, you want change. Unaenda hospitali, hauna usaidizi, and then you're screaming there, you're crying. But see, it's the same person who you went for help na hawaja kusaidia, sasa utarudia. You're a fool.
So you're calling them to be that rather cat which wants to be a lion, but first it must lose appetite for rats.
Yeah.
That is your call to action to them.
That is my call to action. Anyone but them. Where we are, anyone but them.
There you have it from Nerima Wako, Executive Director, Siasa Place, a youth organization out here, empowering youths in Kenya and also calling out on mess in our democracy space, in our political space, in our governance structures. She's doing a phenomenal work out here. If you want to know more about Siasa Place, Nerima Wako, tell them.
Siasa Place everywhere. Facebook, social media, even Twitter, Instagram, everywhere Siasa Place. Please follow, reach out to us, join us.
And you are at Nerima W across your social media handles, right?
But I'm terrible with social media, but yes.
Perhaps why you need to hire an assistant soon enough, right?
Nerima W.
Nerima W.
Yeah.
There you have it. Thank you so much, Nerima, for selecting time for our program this week.
Thank you.
We wait to have you on board next week, Saturday. And we really applaud your efforts in really making Kenya a better country by the day.
Thank you.
We hope that that history will have a better place for you.
Amen.
More than just a footnote.
Thank you, Rich.
All right. Until we get to do this again, do enjoy the rest of your viewing. I'm Richard Mwenja. Get me at Mwenja Richard across my social media handles. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing.